Hold, there's something wrong. Really? Each prior time upon the fall of Sauron, the shimmering pool had opened, following the liberation rite, taking in whichever exile prevailed. But now all is still, and the light of the stars above all but died. You sense a growing fear that it is already too late. The shimmering pool shall not reveal itself again. Orlek approaches, his head bowed. The 8 scribes saved their greatest treachery for last. Then something else catches his notice. Wait. A sudden rush of starlight. Motherfucker, I forgot! A sudden rush of starlight cascades through the stillness of the summit. The shimmering pool has appeared again, different somehow, but open. Volfred looks upon it, but it does not engulf him, or at least, not yet. Seems I was mistaken then. The 8 scribes, this is not their greatest treachery, it's their greatest jest. The shimmering pool is flood wide open. It seems that all are worthy now of freedom. Orlek strides toward the shimmering pool, but halt, Orlek. Orlek glances over the lone minstrel, almost in surprise. The shimmering pool has lost most of its strength. You step inside, and you will surely drown. Of that, I can assure you. He laughs to himself at this. Then we have all been cheated. No. The shimmering pool is revealed, and one of you may still return as planned. But as for who returns, someone still has to choose. Ere the last light of the stars is extinguished and the rite cease to be, this is the final trial of the scribes. The final trial of the scribes. Then our confrontation, the liberation rite, it was all meaningless. No. The victor of the confrontation is to be the one to make the choice. Among those closest to the scribe, either the anointed or she who anointed them. So then the choice is mine to make. My freedom weighed against the readers, is that it? It shall be either you, the reader, or it shall be either or. Volfred, please make your decision quickly, lest it shall be forfeit. I do not know for how much longer the light of the stars shall offer you this gift. A snap decision then. Fine. I have it made. Reader, my girl, this chance at freedom that we've earned, it's yours. Take it now and make good use of it, for you and all of us. Volfred wishes to give up his freedom so that you may regain yours. Very well. Reader, madam, the choice which Volfred made, or rather, the choice he gave, it is now yours to make instead. No. This choice. It may keep bouncing back and forth like this absurd. It may, until such time as one of you is willing to accept the burden and the outcome of the choice. That is the trial, and I fear that there's little time remaining now. Reader, if you and your companion are too cordial with each other to accept the freedom either one of you, then I shall gladly take it. Freedom ought to be more than some flirtatious trifle to exchange. Reader, what is your will? Volfred, I already made my choice. You were decided. You have chosen Volfred. He looks at you with some astonishment. Volfred, sir, do you accept the reader's choice, or shall you make another? Yes, I accept the reader's choice in this. I thank you from the bottom of my heart, my girl. I'm afraid I don't know what else to say. Then it is done. You see a look of genuine surprise flash across Volfred's face, and then he is gone. I made my choice. I decided long ago, and it was completely accepted the fact that I wasn't leaving. He is gone. You have a chance at freedom, so that you gave a chance at freedom, so that Volfred may yet have his. May he return in glory.
Godspeed, Volfred Sandalwood. By the scribes, no stars remain aloft. The cycle of the rites. It is finished.
Yeah. That's what happens when you lose focus on a religion.
What shall become of it?
The original religion dies for your fascism.
Nightwings. The opportunity to gain your freedom from the downside. Was it not enough?
No. No, it wasn't. That night, the exile Falfred returned to the Commonwealth. He was to be the last. The stars had faded and the cycle of the rites had run its course. He found the Commonwealth in great upheaval. Spurred by the efforts of the 5 liberated exiles, Walfrid Sandalwood's revolutionary plan had incited the masses. These exiles, the starless sky, portended the return of the Scribes. The people surged into the streets, shoulder to shoulder. Led by the 5 exiles, their voices shook the heavens. The leadership of the Commonwealth panicked. No blood was shed that night. By dawn, it was over. The leaders of the Commonwealth had cast themselves back into exile, or joined in this new cause. Thus, in its 838th year, the Commonwealth had fallen. The new Saharan Union declared its sovereignty in the next year. Among the changes its elect leaders ushered in, they vowed never to cast their people into exile, and they abolished the old Commonwealth decree forbidding literacy. Today, we still remember all of this. And we remember the exiles of the downside whose deed led to the dawning of our age, whether they returned or not. So yeah, true freedom. True freedom. Beat your quest. Ah, yes. So we get all the characters here. I don't think he can get freedom. But basically, every circle here is someone who could have gotten freedom. Maybe not. After the cycle of the rites ceased turning, records of what happened to the Black Wagon of the Nightwings became inconclusive and contradictory. Some accounts suggest that the exile of the Nightwings who remained in the downside continued to make use of the Black Wagon as their place of shelter and their means of travel. However, there is no record of what happened to the wagon's contents, such as the Book of the Rites or the Beyonder Crystal, said to be haunted by the apparition of Sandra, the Unseeing. One possibility is that the lone minstrel took his leave. He took the Beyonder Crystal with him, for he was thus obliged. But this lay in reasoning, however, the Black Wagon itself should have been taken also. Others remain skeptical that the Beyonder Crystal ever existed, or rather that the vision that it granted were anything other than the result of an active imagination or a fever dream. The bog dwellers of the southern bogs offer still another explanation, for they are familiar with binding enchantments. If there existed such an object, in which the Sisters of the Arch have been expelled for more than 800 years, then the enchantment could have expired along with the lights of the stars. What this would have meant for Sandra and the Beyonders is difficult to say for certain, other than it may have meant they were finally released. Nevertheless, the fates of Sandra and the Beyonder Crystal remain unknown. Yet those exiles of the Nightwings who claimed to have seen this apparition all spoke of her with a degree of reverence, perhaps a little fear. Can you believe this, reader? Honestly? Sandra has appeared before you, as well you can see. They are so far from the mark with all this nonsense. I want to laugh. In fact, here goes. She is referring to the count of her. You sense she does not care for it. Well, let them gossip all they like. I merely wish that they would mention you at least in passing when next they're at it. Though, they shall never know even half of it, shall they? Sandra seems irritated at the account of what happened to her. Reassure her. You suggested, Sandra, that the account of what occurred to her was really not that bad, and you liked aspects of it. You're much too diplomatic, you know that. You can tell she is unswayed, and yet her grin remains intact. She appreciates the gesture. Anyway, let's get going, lovely reader. You know the truth of it. That's what matters. She fades into the Beyonder Crystal for now, and you tuck it away safe. Tizo! Oh, I have to click. No shit in space. Once the rites had ended, Imp Tizo had a job to do. Quite unlike most exiles trapped forever in the downside. The lone minstrel asked that he watched over the Black Wagon, which the Nightwings had used extensively for travel and for shelter throughout their quest. Tizo obliged, for he knew that wagon, as well as its drive imps inhabitants, perhaps better than anyone. What became of the wagon exactly was never verified, as evidence of Tizo's thorough work. After that, he liked to while away his days with any of his friends, or else with fellow imps. He would visit his friend Faye at every opportunity. She was among the few who could consistently interpret what he meant, and they were always close since they first met. Volfred Sanderwood would sometimes send him little gifts, all the way from the downside, despite the insurmountable distance between them, and their friendship proved more than resilient. He often chirped about the reader. Oh, it's glowing for some reason. You were the exile of the Commonwealth. Okay, cool. With whom he built quite a rapport. The reader understood him perhaps better than anyone. Indeed, Tizo would often express wishful gratitude for all his time with the Nightwings and their many adventures throughout the land. That was always his home. Other than that, Tizo would sometimes help interpret his messenger imps relaying news to and from the Saharan Union, our nation formed in 839 AS after the fall of the Commonwealth. Despite having gained significant celebrity abroad, he never let it go to his head, and he would go fishing in the Sea of Solace every single chance he got. I'm going to remove all the people who didn't get it out first. See, this is misleading. Fucking Deckbird. Damn it. Long after the rites had ended, Faye admitted that she knew well before the fact that she would not be going home again. At least, she had a very strong feeling. She ended up not minding very much because she had little to return to the Commonwealth. Her sense of home had changed. She took to wandering from one celestial landmark to the next, even paying homage to the 8 scribes, who she believed had influence over her inspired. She supposed to be friends with the king! Damn it, Dagbert! And oh man, I hope his life is okay up there. Like all anger aside about him, like Faye not getting her happiest ending with him, I am gonna be so much more upset if he also has an unhappy ending on the surface. Like, just the dumb... She took to wandering, blah, blah, blah. She was no stranger to traveling alone, and was always happy to have company. Among her friends, she always remained close with Tizo, who more so than anyone, why did I say it twice, could always make her laugh. Though they could not see each other any longer, Faye often thought about Jodariel, and spoke to her as though she were there. Faye could never make decisions without first consulting her idea of what Miss Jodariel might say. Whenever she felt genuine doubt, which was not very often, she sought out the reader of the Nightwings. If there was anyone whom she trusted as much as the Scribes, it was her. Faye always was devoted to her faith, but more so to her friends. Her gentle manner and unwavering conviction often helped them brave life in the downside, both with courage and with grace. Alright, Pamitha, how you liking it down here? After the rites ended, Pamitha Than parted ways with the other Nightwings, stating that she needed time alone. She reappeared sometime after the fall of the Commonwealth, although she expressed mild surprise at the news. She claimed to have no knowledge of what went on, including what role the Highwing remnants had in the events that reshaped the world on the other side. For her part, Pamitha feigned little interest, making the point that they were all stuck, and what happened elsewhere had little to do with them now. One day, while traveling the Black Basin, Pamitha ran into her blood sister Tamitha for the first time since the conclusion of the rites. Their reunion was not as amicable as Pamitha might have hoped, and Tamitha, still resentful of their history together, turned violent. Pamitha later would brush aside the incident, although always had an injury to show for it. Yes, from that point on, the blood sisters were back on speaking terms, at least for the most part. Having long since felt as though she had no home to call her own, Pamitha continued traveling about the downside. As the tempest swept across the land, changing its features, she found in it a sublime beauty, and in the starless nights she could see just fine. She said such travels tended to remind her of when she was younger and can fly unfettered. Alright, so that's the end of our people that didn't make it out. Let's go with first the Betrayer. After... Oh, is it ready to do both at the same time, are we? Alright, rude. After his liberation, Ulmer Oldheart was separated from his father Dalbert, who had cast his son into the Shimmering Pool in his own place. The elder, Dalbert Oldheart, having achieved his goal of earning back his son's freedom, retired from the rites. By the time the cycle of rites had reached its end, Dalbert's time had come as well. Ulmer did not learn of this until much later. Surely Dalbert would have wanted it that way. Would that he could have seen his son during this vital time. On the night of the Scribes' return, inspired by the liberated exiles, the people of the Commonwealth demanded new leadership. Oh, so we're going to say that the night that Volfred got out, I guess. Ulmer became inspired by what he saw happening all around him. He reminded him of his father's words and beliefs. Soon, Ulmer joined the cause, and his voice rose in unison with all the others in the crowd. Good start, good start. From that point forward, he worked tirelessly to continue his father's work as a historian and a curator of Kur culture. He ended up proving invaluable perspective during the formation of the Saharan Union as someone strongly connected to both Kurs and to his own kind. The fuck? He found that the Old Heart lineage carried a great deal of respect. It was able to bridge many cultural issues between his people as they transitioned into modern times. Not a day went by that Ulmer Oldheart did not think about his father and give thanks to him and speak to him at morning and at night. Would that the stars yet shone, for surely Dalbert's be among them, smiling down at his son and watching over him and his kin. Yeah, they are. After the final liberation rite, Lendl refused to believe the rites had truly ended. He would sit through night after consecutive night, staring at the blackness of the sky, waiting any kind of sign that he might gain another chance at freedom. No such sign ever came. His fellow accusers started to express concern for him. Survival had become their top priority once liberty had slipped through their grasp, but Lendl dismissed them as weak fools. He insisted rather forcefully that any evening now the stars would shine for him again and mark their way toward his inevitable freedom. He was, of course, mistaken. The others in his triumvirate were left with little choice but to abandon him. After that, the exile known as Lendl the Liar was never seen again. However, there have since been sightings of a bereaved demon who wanders the downside and bears Lendl's cruel countenance, suggesting he that lives. Blah, blah, blah. All his life, Sir Deluge had fled from one danger only to find himself facing another. He had escaped the war-torn waters of the Sea Dominion. He had escaped the blood border of the Commonwealth, and now he had escaped the rites. After the rites had ended, many exiles wrapped up in the ancient test were crestfallen as their last chance to return to their homes vanished, along with the stars above. But Deluge didn't mind, for this outcome meant that at last there was no burden of responsibility weighing down on him. While most of his fellow exiles of the Pyre Heart yet longed for the waters of the Sea Dominion, driven as ever by their impulses towards conflict, Deluge settled down. With him remained one of his companions, one Lady Seagrass, who had taken a liking to him for some reason. Reportedly, they disappeared into the waters of Worm Gulf, which may begin to explain the significant increase in worm population observed in the vicinity. Some sort of significant increase? Significant increase from 2? Never mind. That's not who I want to click on. When Manly Tinderstuff realized the rites had ended, that he could no longer return to the Commonwealth, though his ancient means, he was outraged. He cursed the Scribes. I'm sorry, I just really enjoy the voice. He cursed the Scribes, spewing forth such a slew of blasphemy as to be very unbecoming of one of his high status and bearing. When at last he calmed himself, he focused on his energies on attempting to find another means of homecoming. He maintained regular contact with his wealthy family and they decided via messenger him and used their vast resources to explore the other means of escape. He tried using an elaborate pulley system. He attempted to retrofit a flying black wagon with superior propulsion. He tried an imp raft, a hot air balloon, even prayer. Nothing worked. There was only one way to escape the downside, and now it was gone. Tinderstuff bankrupted his family in his vain attempts. At last, such was the shame, they were treated to the teeming woods of Black Basin, to cinder roots. There he yet wallows, complaining to his comrades of the chastity, who still put up with him, either about his misfortune or the latest news from the other side. Pathetic. After the cycle of the rites had ceased, this voice is a pain to do. After the cycle of the rites had ceased, Witch Hilda returned to the Flagging Hands region, where she sealed herself within the pit of Millith. There, even her fellow exiles of the Withdrawn allegedly grew unnerved after a time and left her in her vile work. Sometime later, the pit of Milith erupted into flame, so intense that the conflagration that it could be seen all the way from Jordan Valley. Arson was suspected, though the cause was never verified, and many bog dwellers in the region were forced to flee. A tempest blowing from the north finally quenched the flames. When at last the ashes settled, the grounds were cooled and the site of the fire was scarred beyond recognition, no trace of Witchhild could be found. As for the contents of the Pit of Milith, which notably included a profane object thought to be the remains of Yaslak, all of it was gone as well. Back in the Sumerian Union, Umhild's reported threats of return of Yaslak were thoroughly investigated, and no credence was found to any of her claims. Well, that's because she'd fucking failed. Barker Ashpaws never had much interest in return to the Commonwealth, for he always found it bylaws to be stifling. So when the rites ended, he did not care at first. He soon grew very bored. The rites had given his life a certain sense of structure. He had always needed. He missed the raw anticipation of it all. He decided to continue conducting the rites for the thrill of it. He bent some rules, replaced some of the objects, but it was close enough. His packmates, the Dissidents, proved more than happy to participate, and thus they ran against each other back in Jomar Valley. Gradually, other exiles familiar with the rites, as well as those who had not heard of it at all, started to take an interest. They ended up giving Barker Ashpaws some healthy competition. His old feud with Rookie Greentail ceased meaning anything to him. He forgot all about it amid his new pursuits. Ultimately, even Barker Ashpaws, who had led such a directionless existence to this point, found something of a calling through the rites. Whether he took the rites less seriously than any other exile of his time, or more, was oft debated by those who watched him work. I suddenly turned into David Attenborough. What a fine specimen this was. I am very tired. Tamitha. Throughout her exile, Tamitha Thane was motivated by a single goal: to return to the Commonwealth and exact vengeance on her ancient enemies. When she realized the rites had ended, that she would never see the mountain home again, she nonetheless remained determined to aid her people however possible. She had gathered certain information pertaining to the intention of the Nightwings, who had formed a pact to regroup on the other side after the liberation. Other such reports exposed certain weaknesses in the Commonwealth defenses and revealed to the Highwing remnants the opportunity for a risky but potential impactful strike. As Tamitha could not participate in the assault, she learned what happened well after the outcome. On the night known as Scribes' return, the Commonwealth had fallen. The Highwing remnants thus prevailed at last, without even having to fight. Soon after the fall of the Commonwealth, Tamitha encountered her blood sister, Pamitha, come to pay her a visit. Pamitha had hoped the people's victory on the other side would cause for reconciliation. Tamitha was skeptical for her intentions, however, and lashed out at her. Pamitha made no attempt to elude the attack and was struck full on. This cost Pamitha the use of her right wing. Yet after she recovered, she shrugged the incident aside and said maybe they can call it even now. At this point on, the Blood Sisters kept a formal distance and were cordial with each other. Knowing the conflict on their side had ended, Tamitha retreated to the crags of Black Basin and grew ever more distant. Those closest to her surmised that her inability to reconcile with her blood sister was at the heart of this, though for her part, Tamitha never once admitted to any such weakness. I don't know how I could have made them reconcile. I mean, maybe having them fight against each other more often, but that seems like a terrible idea. Once it became clear, Ignaris, that the rites were drawing to a close, he knew that it was time for him and the Tempers to call it quits. But first, he and the Tempers decided to celebrate. That they did. For many, many nights, the revelry did eventually subside. The exiles partied amicably and went their separate ways. He roamed the downside then, searching for some meaning in life, sometimes taking odd jobs requiring brute strength, but never remained alone for very long and took on many lovers in his time. However, he sometimes thought about the one he had called Curly Horns and what became of her. Though his glory days as the most powerful conductor of the rites had long since passed, he always enjoyed the fearsome reputation he had cultivated at that time. After the shimmering pool closed for what would be the last time, Orlok looked around him in the flickering light of the Nightwing's still burning pyre. He then turned to the fall of Sarum, looked up toward the black starless sky. He cursed the 8 scribes. Then, one after the other. After that, he strode forward towards the waters coursing from the side of Mount Elodil, and without hesitation, he cast himself down. Orlek's body was never recovered. The drop from Mount Elodil does not appear survivable, though Orlek did survive it once. That time, however, he was filled with fury. Such was the betrayal he had suffered when his fellow exile claimed his rightful freedom. This time, Orlek was filled with nothingness and chose to leave the downside in the one way he still knew he could. The other Nightwings who were witness to this never forgot what they saw. Alright, let's do this in the order they went free, which I believe was bam, 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 bam. Alright. After his liberation, Hedwyn was instrumental in the events leading to the fall of the Commonwealth, and was vital in the outcome of the plan. The peaceful outcome of the Scribes' return was attributed to several key factors. One of them was the underlying ambition of the plan itself. Another was Hedwyn's visibility among people in the streets. Identified to be a liberated exile, he was believed to be Gol Gatharin reborn. More importantly, however, was one of the winged harps of the High Wing remnants accompanied him. She was later identified as Fikani Shang, a harp from whom Hedwyn cared deeply. They were separated when he deserted because he fell in love with the harp. Power to you, man. Their bond was symbolic of what was at stake that night and proved vital to the peace that followed. In all his days as a leader of the Sumerian Union, Hedwyn often confided in his friend Jodariel. Despite her intense manner, there was no one whom he trusted more in times when circumspection was required. Hedwyn would often think back about the vow he made at the beginning of his quest for freedom. Although he cherished all friendship he made, he had pledged to Jodariel and Rookie Greentail and the Reader of the Nightwings they might all be free again together. He had broken that vow, for, in the end, not all of them were able to return. A terrible guilt over this darkened his mood for a time. However, the others whom he still knew lifted his spirits, much like he had often lifted theirs. All of the Nightwings knew the stakes. While the others who stood with the Nightwings were not all able to remain in contact thus, Hedwyn thought of each of them often, and so in turn did they oft think of him. Rookie Greentail. After Rookie Greentail earned back his freedom, he returned to a lavish welcome ceremony in the Commonwealth, as with the tendency for liberated exiles. It was everything he could hope for, and soon he was well off, surrounded by luxury, and choosing between various exciting opportunities. However, he must have given in to his better judgment, as he did end up siding with Volfred Sandalwood's revolutionary forces, as he promised. On the night of the Scribes' return, Greentail was there with the others, inspiring the masses. He never looked prouder, the very image of Jomer Many-Mane himself. When dawn finally came and it became clear the Commonwealth that everybody knew would be no more, he realized many new opportunities awaited. He began a quite lucrative career for himself, manufacturing and selling replica merchandise inspired by the downside. His main struggle was to meet demand. An aspect of his consciousness cautioned him against making light of such things, but the money was too good, and soon his family was well off, as he had always said. He also kept close in touch with Gilman, ever the perfect practice partner. They would train together often, taking care to stay in tip-top shape as much as possible throughout the years. Greentail always did his best to keep in touch with all his many friends, and knew that he owed his fortunes to them. He made a special point of staying close with the group of friends he came to know so well during his time with the Nightwings, wherever they were. They shared a special understanding that even put Greentail at a loss for words sometimes. Jodariel. After her liberation, Jodariel soon became an icon of the movement that led the collapse of the Commonwealth and the rise of the Solarian Union. Her horns and stern countenance, inspired the people to believe that she was Solin Mur reborn. She became a great, if reluctant, leader. In the uncertain times that followed, Jodariel's seasoned expertise often came into play both in matters of security and of state. For instance, she conscripted and trained a team of volunteers in public safety. The community did not know what to make of such a cordial bunch at first, but soon came to value their service. They have stood for the people ever since, and we celebrate their founding day each year. She remained close with Hedwyn, had to win, all through his experience, and they supported each other through his struggling many, many times. She often had to stop herself from fearing for Faye, whom she tried to look after as much as possible on the downside. Soon, she would reassure herself that Faye was capable of surviving on her own, and in fact, she was not mistaken. She continued training on her own, in a regime that grew stricter with each passing year. There were those who sought to train with her, and she sometimes obliged. There remained one other constant in her life. She would always remember her days among the Nightwings, and with fondness for the most part. Gilman. When the worm Gilman returned to the Commonwealth, he believed that he had regained something even more important than his freedom, his honor. Gilman relinquished his knighthood and declined an opportunity to serve as captain on the Blood Border. He was not interested in fighting any longer. Yet, as it sometimes the case with those such as he, a circumstance soon came about in which there came a need for him to once again make use of his military training. Thankfully, however, the Scribes' return ended peacefully. Gilman was on edge throughout that night, expecting violence to erupt at any moment, but the moment never came. When the matter was last put to rest, the Gilman truly knew his time as a knight had ended. He declared to all those in earshot that he would never fight again. Unless, of course, there arose some other extraordinary set of circumstances, again requiring him to fight, but he certainly hoped not. He still trained regularly, just in case, especially with his fleet-footed friend, Rookie Greentail. From time to time, he would seek guidance from one of his former comrades, Big Bertrude, much his elder and wellspring of perspective in his life decisions. He was always grateful, having studied under the leader of the Nightwings, without whom he would never have completed his penance. Because of this, and perhaps because they were on opposite sides of the world now, Gilman dedicated his life to her. By that point, he had long forgotten about his days under the leadership of Sir Deluge, his former commander. Breaking free of abusive leadership was his first step towards gaining a bit of self-respect. Holy shit, there's so much sunlight outside. When did that happen? Anyway, never returned to was content to lead a monastic life on a small residence of the hills. It was just high up enough to make him keep striving to conquer his fear of heights. Other than that, an intense daily training regime and the occasional visit from an old companion was more than enough to keep him optimistic and engaged. He knew by then that honor was not something to be won, but a contract with oneself to be renewed each day. Bertrude. After returning to the Commonwealth, the crone known as Big Bertrude promptly returned to wet climate of her ancestral home in the southern bogs. There, for a time, it appeared she distanced herself from any involvement with society or with the plan of which she was a part. We know now that she worked diligently towards the goal outlined by Sandalwood, yet well outside the notice of even those who watched her movements closely. For example, the printed notice spread throughout the streets about the Knights of Scribe return were all her doing, yet no one knew until she owned up to it much later. Subsequently, she returned her focus to the sort of work which had preoccupied her for many, many years, both in the downside and in the Commonwealth, and she remotely managed aspects of her business in the downside, ensuring that the exiles who remained there still could hold out for get a hold of certain valuables. Much of her effort was doubtless due to the influence of Sandalwood, someone whom she had admired for decades. He had made clear that he could not requite her feelings for him, but what could have been a hurtful dismissal led only to a deeper understanding between them. Bertrude, most of all, kept busy with her work. The inks and notices which she still brewed and manufactured once were grounds enough for quick sentence into exile. Back then, the one thing worse than spreading lies with the Commonwealth through speech was to do so in print. Once exposed, such writings were all burnt. Now the written point of view is to be honored rather than feared, and Big Bertrude remains one of the time's most notable purveyors of this craft. It is quite likely something you have read in recent times would have been put in parchment by her handiwork. When Valfried Sandalwood regained his freedom, he knew that his work had only just begun. The nation that had exiled him into life in the downside had prepared to honor him, but he was not interested in such a ceremony, knowing the freedom of the Commonwealth's own terms. He soon rejoined his agents, with whom he had been coordinating for years, slowly and carefully preparing for a night that soon would come. For Sandalwood and his loyalties and sympathizers, true freedom was at stake, not just theirs, but that of everyone living under the Commonwealth. He hoped to gather liberated exiles representing each of the 8 largest ethnic groups. Liberated exiles. Well, we missed a couple. Composing the population of the Commonwealth. They would stand together as a vision of the 8 scribes returned, inspiring the masses to embrace the older set of values from before the Commonwealth had tightened its grip. With the rites having ended sooner than expected, this optimal scenario became impossible, but Sandalwood did not relent and prepared to execute his plan, imperfect though it was. On the night of the scribes' return, he stood as one of 5 former exiles of the Nightwings, and their voices echoed together through the streets. These former exiles, who ought to have disappeared into the ranks of the Commonwealth's own leadership, now stood united with its people, who poured from their homes in solidarity. It was imperative to Sandalwood that this stand against the Commonwealth be peaceful in its nature. An overwhelming show of popular support would be more than enough. Ensuring this was his priority that night, and in the end, the result was self-evident. The plan's goal had been achieved. If only that worked in real life, eh? Sandalwood's work far from over still. He labored ceaselessly with representatives from across the population to restore a sense of stability. The transitional period had its troubles, though none that were not quickly solved, such as the will and spirit of the people. They understood their freedom and carried new responsibility. After the Saharan Union was born the next year, Sandalwood was elected as the nation's first prime minister. It was not his intent to run for this office, but the people chose him anyway. He led our fledgling nation through its nascent years. As Valfred Sandalwood gained more fame throughout this land for all his sacrifices and his contributions, he remained ever steadfast about 2 things. The first was that the cause itself ought to remain in focus. The freedom of that the people had achieved was a gift to be cherished, a set of values that needed to be nurtured. And the second point he made was that he himself had little to do with the outcome. He had often praised the exiles of the Nightwings who stood with him each in turn by name. He never forgot any of them. One day on his birthday, the people of the Saharan Union presented to him a monument depicting him and the Nightwings as imagined in their prime. It has since ensured that those of us with memories more fallible than that of Sandalwood likewise remember the achievements of his fellow former exiles and of our cause. With the rites drawn to a close, the slug market's revenues fell propitiously, and Falcon Ron was forced to liquidate his assets and close up shop. Yet, as it's sometimes the case with those of entrepreneurial leaning, this time of hardship led to an epiphany, or at least a sudden change of fortune. One day, Falcon Ron had a run-in with a messenger bearing news from the other side. Ron gave it one of its remaining trinkets, which could not be sold. The following week, the messenger returned to him bearing a tidy sum of wealth in newly minted coinage from the Saharan Union. Falcon Ron cut a long-term deal with the messenger then and there. Though his trade remained a gray area with legal standpoint of the Saharan Union, the newfound fame of the downside caused Falcon Ron's good to explode in popularity. He later signed an elaborate agreement with Big Bertrude and found a distribution partner on the other side through Rookie Greentail, whose own business had expanded. Especially in the Saharan Union, Falcon Ron's goods are still known for their superior quality, though he assumes no liability for any side effects. After the cycle of the rites ceased turning, the lone minstrel bade the remaining Nightwings take the Black Wagon and seek their fortune elsewhere on the downside. Their parting was heartfelt but brief. They remained there at the summit of Mount Aladil with Celeste, where the two of them would chronicle the final outcome of the cycle. Neither Tarek nor Celeste was ever seen again. We know all this now through song attributed to them. Some claim these songs originated in the taverns of the Saharan Union and merely were imbued with weights of folklore. However, exiles liberated from the downside corroborate each other's claims at having met this duo that presided over the liberation rites. Another folklore suggests these minstrels were heralds of the Scribes. Having fulfilled their obligations, they departed the world we knew and rejoined their patrons. One of the famous songs described another, simpler outcome. The two gave up their duties to the rights in favor of a life they could share together. In any case, they are likely to remain the subject of such verses and such songs, for it was they who watched over the rights and ushered in other times. There is one more account which warrants mention. The Nightwings conducted the rites under the guidance of a reader. Little is known of her. However, some accounts of her begin to paint a picture. We know she was of common birth, always directionless and prone to misremembering at times. Okay. Yes? The journey of the downside left her close to death. It was then that the Nightwings found her. They brought her from the brink, and she showed them the path. She pressed onward with the others. She made a vow to help her friends be free. Thus did the cycle of the rite commence its final turns. When the final rites arrived, the reader's freedom was at stake. In the end, however, she remained in exile. From that point on, accounts of her diverge. It's said that the voice which troubled her, she never heard again. Some say she helped improve the lives of other downside exiles, though whether that is true, only she knows. Someday, perhaps the reader's own star shall emerge. Then it shall pierce the dark of night in all its brilliant glory. Until such time and ever after, all of us give thanks.
Their journey began on a barren waste where the reader arrived. Afraid of
Man, this episode is long.
when she arrived, the book of rights awakened the Nightwings.
Sorry, but I can't cut off this song. It has to be listened to. We have to listen to this entire song. We have to see this art because
Follow the stars
so beautiful.
together.
I have no quips. I have no jokes. This is art, and I'll be damned if I ruin it.
We sing of the last of the Nightwings who, having broken the cycle, shall live on in song. Headwind prevailed and strode the path that his heart laid before him. He has found his way home. Captain Joe Dariel, mother to many a foundling, she has found her way home. Rookie Greentail has proved his worth and returned to his family by the grace of the Scribes. They follow the stars bound together, strands in a braid till the end.
The moon-touched girl feels the scribes in the heart of the downside. She remained to the end. Tears of the wise, ever faithful to the cause of the Nightwings. He remained to the end.
Sir Gilman the Bold, ever in his quest, finding honor and glory, he has found his way home. Mammoth the Thane, born on guilty wings, ever seeking forgiveness, she remains to the enchanter Bertrude made her rivals pay with the darkest of curses. She has found her way home. The reader at last made the night wings whole, having bound them together. She remained till the end. They follow the stars, bound together, strands in a braid till the end. They follow the stars, bound together, strands in a braid till the end. Now at the end, as we bid farewell and return to the stars, we shall find our way home. We shall find our way home. We shall find our way home.
I hope most of you understand why I had to leave that unblemished. Just, it's so good. It's so pretty. And I'm assuming that is the library of the Commonwealth, or of the Solarian Union now, because we won. Got the symbols of all the triumvirates. Even has the true and the false Nightwings. The end. But you can see now why I was like at an impasse for whether or not there's gonna be a second run, because there's so many different options, you know? Like, we could have literally never have any one of our people liberate. True Nightwing campaign unlocked. Prepare to main menu. As far as I know, it's just a harder difficulty. Like a significantly harder difficulty. Whoa. Jesus. Campaign mode. If I do this, new campaign. True Nightwing. For players who finish the campaign, your adversary shall be favored with the stars themselves. Base difficulty set in same as heightened. All Titan stars unlocked. Some must be used. Enlightenment required to rank up rescaled. Cannot load checkpoints or restart rights. Book of Rights and White Loot fully unlocked. Slug Market inventory fully unlocked. Feats of Glory introduced much sooner. What's chosen this setting cannot be changed. So reduced, you may change the setting anytime. Heightened is just slightly difficult. Shall be the worst against you. Yeah, so it's no more difficult than the hardest difficulty. It just has a lot of other things. Hurry text. Oh, subtitles. Oh. Weird. Aim assist. What? I don't think I had that. Probably for the best. But yeah, so that's it. Man, the book burning at the main menu just occurred to me. I didn't realize that was a book burning. That's it. Anyway, that is the end of this episode. Final episode. There's a very good chance that this has been split into 2 episodes. Because I don't know. I feel like I'm going for a while with this one. Which is a shame, but like there was a lot. If you want me... Honestly, I would love to say that I go back and I'll do another run where we do like a bunch of different things. Like we see different stuff. But I think it'd be better to just Google all the possible endings at this point. Like, you've seen the story up until now. Like, trying to play every possibility, it's not going to feel the same. It's not going to hit the same. Like, that first run, That's the one that hits you. And you saw fucking Delbert. Highly recommend this game. Like, normally I try and play games that are hard to play, that most people didn't really enjoy, but have a story that I think you guys should get a chance to see. And this is one of the ones, like, it just didn't get enough attention in my opinion. But like, I highly recommend, like, even if you just play it through on easy, and like, give yourself a chance to fail. Like, if you want the challenge and you think you can handle it, go for it. If you, like, want to see what happens if you just outright fail, go for it. This is a game that I think kind of rewards that in its own way. Like, it gives you, like, it has a story set up for if you just outright fail. And it's not always bad. Like, fuck, we lost to Almer. I didn't get what I wanted, and Faye said it best with nobody got what they wanted with that, but he still got a happy ending. Like, there was still happiness there. And I feel that needs to be addressed. Like, having the fact that even when failure, you can still get victory is fantastic to me. And I feel like you guys should go out there. Those of you who have not played this or heard of this should go out and find out what your run looks like. Find out where you draw the line at victory. Do you have what it takes to let Tamitha through because Pamitha asked for it? Do you have the heart to do that? I didn't. I fought because I'm a heartless bastard, but I don't know. It's up to you. But that's the end of Pyre, and I don't know what's coming out next week yet. Depends really on how much, like this. I have just filmed enough to fill 2 full months with Pyre, possibly into a 3rd month that I'm not even scheduling for yet. So I am nowhere near planning what's coming after Pyre. So it's going to be a fun surprise. But for now, you guys have yourselves a wonderful night.